Well, there's absolutely nothing in USPAP that says you have to have a letter of transmittal. There's absolutely nothing in USPAP that says you have to use the 1004 form. You can write your appraisal on the back of an envelope if you want to.
Okay.
If you can write really small, you can get it on a sticky note.
Originating from deep inside the Rocky Mountains, transported through the power of the internet, and arriving inside your tiny earbuds. It's the Appraiser Coach Podcast, helping appraisers increase their efficiency, quality, and make more money. Here's the guy who makes it his life's mission to create value for real estate appraisers nationwide. Your host and the Appraiser Coach, Dustin Harris.
And a warm welcome to each of you. Welcome back to the program. Dustin Harris hanging out once again in the podcast chair, and I've got a friend of mine in the other chair here that I'll introduce in just a second after I introduce you to my sponsors. First of all, we've got Alamode. Alamode, of course, is the software that I've been using for over 2 decades. In fact, about 25 years I've been working in Alamode. You should be as well. Check them out by picking up the phone and calling them at 800-ALAMODE, or you can get on their website at alamode.com. We, of course, are sponsored by DataMaster, making your life easier, faster, more efficient, and all of that with higher quality. Check them out by going to datamasterusa.com, datamasterusa.com. Finally, we are sponsored by Working RE Magazine, the place that I go to find out more about what I need to know about the appraisal profession. It's Working RE, as in workingrealestate.com. I want to welcome back to the program a good friend of mine, a frequent guest on the Appraiser Coach Podcast, has a podcast of his own. He is the appraiser's advocate. He is out of Florida, warm Florida, much warmer than where I'm at today. Tim Andersen, welcome back to the program, my friend.
Dustin, hi, thank you. How are you?
I am fabulous, but I'm cold. I'm very cold. It's that time of year, my friend.
Well, in about, 7 more months, it'll be summer, so it's just around the corner.
That's about right. That's about right. Well, as always, Tim, you're very kind with your time and your knowledge, and I just really, really appreciate you being on the program today. We're going to talk about a couple of questions that have come in, and just to introduce new listeners to this segment of the program. Typically, you just get to hear my loud voice here on this program, but there's often questions that come into the program, both to Tim's side and my side, that I personally don't feel totally comfortable answering. I turn to the experts. I've learned over the years that if you don't know something, don't pretend. Turn to somebody that does, and Tim is that individual. And we've had a couple questions, Tim, come in over the last couple weeks that I would like to share with you and just get your feedback and your opinion. Listeners to this program need to know that when you send a question like this, you don't need to wait for the podcast to come out. We typically answer you very quickly via email, and I know Tim is very generous with his time there. But we like to take the questions that we feel have ramifications for the entire group of people, and we typically don't use your name, so don't worry about that. We won't today either. But these are the questions that have come in, Tim, and let's start with number 1, shall we?
Shall we?
All right. So number 1, Tim, is a question about cover letters or letters of transmittal. And before I read the question, just help me understand what a cover letter or a letter of transmittal is. Let's define it first.
Well, okay, in the old days, before you were born and when I was just a little fellow, letters of transmittal were basically an executive summary of what was attached.
Okay.
And it said, hello, this is what we're going to talk about. This is why we talked about it. Here's a very brief summary of the research I did. Here's a brief summary of my findings. And let's get together and talk about this and get the problem resolved and move on to the next one. Okay. That's basically all it was, an executive summary. It was also a way to extend a personal dimension to business. Okay. It was to say, look, we may beat each other up in the courtroom, but out in the hallway, we're friends. Let's go play golf. Okay. And well, we've gotten away from that for good or ill. We've gotten away from that. But a letter of transmittal was just basically a précis, an executive summary of what it was attached to.
Okay. And as an appraiser, as an appraisal business, often those letters of transmittal or cover letters are attached specifically to the report itself. Now, we, as you know, Tim, we don't typically use our little printer button and wait for sheets of paper to be spit out, and then we glue pictures on and we go out to Forms and Worms and get the sticky notes to put on the stickers to put on copied phone book page. Most of what we do, of course, is digital, but there's still a lot of appraisers out there that send the letter of transmittal with the appraisal itself. In other words, these are not 2 different documents. I mean, they may be 2 different documents, but they're bundled together, right?
Yeah, typically, yeah.
Okay. So the question, I'm not going to read it word for word, but the question that came in, Tim, is, are these required? What's their purpose? We've already kind of talked about their purpose. Are they required? I think this individual was doing a review on another appraiser and did not see a letter of transmittal and saw a potential USPAP situation. The question was basically, should I call this out where the appraiser did not attach a letter of transmittal? What say you?
No, there's absolutely nothing in USPAP that says you have to have a letter of transmittal. There's absolutely nothing in USPAP that says you have to use the 1004 form. You can write your appraisal on the back of an envelope if you want to.
Okay.
If you can write really small, you can get it on a sticky note. But to say, oh, well, you didn't use a letter of transmittal, you're an icky, nasty appraiser, and I'm going to send you into the state is a waste of time, because USPAP does not even address the issue. USPAP doesn't address the business of real estate appraisal. It addresses the practice and the ethics of real estate appraisal. You want to send a letter of transmittal, send one. You don't want to send one, don't send one. You want to include a copy of recipe for garlic bread, include one, whatever. That doesn't make any difference. It's the, oh, and by the way, if you'll get in touch with my website, I will send you my recipe for garlic bread. But the point is, the point is, no, the appraiser did not violate USPAP by not including a letter of transmittal. It's in the software if you want to send one. If you don't want to send one, don't send one. It's not a violation.
Okay, so I'm really glad you made this distinction, because you said USPAP is not, and I repeat, not a rules and regulation book for appraisal businesses. It's more about the ethics and morals that we as appraisers need to follow as far as our appraisals go and valuation services go. Standard 1, of course, being the development of that appraisal, and standard 2 being the reporting. This question goes to the reporting side, but what you're talking about is this is a business decision. Whether you choose to include the letter of transmittal or not is no different than whether you choose to put your appraisal in red ink or black. Right?
Exactly. It doesn't make any difference.
Okay, so I want to go to a bigger.
There's absolutely.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Go to a bigger picture. No, I was going to say there's absolutely nothing that says that including a letter of transmittal makes a better appraisal report. What's important is the appraisal report be not confusing. That's the issue. And if including a letter of transmittal helps to untangle the web that many appraisals tend to be, yeah, okay. But if you don't need one, you don't want one, or that's not your practice, then don't do it. There's no requirement you do.
Tim, so I love this answer, because I think this goes to a bigger picture, a bigger question. And though this wasn't the question asked, I want to talk just briefly, Tim, about this idea. And I see this frequently, both in my coaching, when I spy on people through social media, or at least when I follow the forums online with appraisers. I often see things that were taught to appraisers by their mentors that get confused, or practices and ways of doing things get confused with what's USPAP and what's not. In other words, I'll see someone say, well, that's a violation of USPAP. I saw one the other day, someone was talking about comp photos, and somebody jumped on there. Why wouldn't you get your own comp photos? If you don't, you're violating USPAP. Talk to me about this idea of what USPAP does versus what USPAP doesn't, because I think we use USPAP quite frequently as a scapegoat.
Well, because so many appraisers do, or for Fannie and Freddie and the other GSEs, and because the GSEs have a requirement that the appraiser include photographs, then appraisers tend to think, oh, well, I have to do that with every appraisal I do. No, they don't. That's part of your scope of work. If you don't need to send photos, why send photos? And now Fannie, Freddie et al. Demand photos. USPAP doesn't. USPAP doesn't even mention photos. USPAP doesn't even require you to inspect the property. Yep. It just merely says if you don't, you have to disclose it. So no, there's absolutely nothing in USPAP that says you have to include any kind of a photo. You don't have to include maps. You don't have to include photos. You don't have to include plats. Those are in there simply to make the report easier to read, easier to understand. That's all. There's no requirement they be in USPAP. Let's go back to adjustments. If you go to standard 1, you will not find the word adjustment or adjustments. You don't find those until something like AO13, because USPAP doesn't require adjustments. That's a GSE construct. That's got nothing to do with USPAP. It is perfectly acceptable, and in my opinion, a whole lot clearer to appraise properties without adjustments. You rank the property. This one's a whole lot like the subject. That one isn't very much like the subject. Therefore, the subject's going to have a value pretty close to the one that's a lot like it, and pretty far away from the one that isn't like it. And out of that range, I choose la-di-da because it's Tuesday and I had Mexican for lunch. But adjustments are totally artificial, and in my opinion, serve to confuse as much as anything else, because somebody will write, well, I adjusted the bedroom $10,843. Well, really? $843? $3? Really? Okay. And that, in my opinion, that is blatantly misleading. $10,000. Okay, I'll buy that. All right. Okay. But $10,843. Yeah, that's what the computer says. That's what the math does. Yeah, I'll buy that. But our common friend Scott Cullen tells a story about a 1 million 3-year-old bone in a museum, and somebody said, "Well, how did you come up with 1 million 3 years old?" And the guy says, "Well, I've been working here for 3 years, and when I started, it was 1 million years old." Okay.
I love it.
So, okay, is it 1,000,003 years old? Yeah, mathematically, it's 1,000,003 years old. But does that really make any difference? No, it doesn't make any difference.
I love it. Well, USPAP requires a bathroom wainscot. We know that, but other
Oh,
things.
you got to have the bathroom wainscot. Yep, sure do.
All right. I want to pause here and remind you we're sponsored by three great companies. Of course, Alamode is that system that I use, that computer, if you will, that helps me to come up with numbers that I can then use my brain and decide which one I want to use, whether it be $10,843, or maybe we'll just round it to 10,000. But Alamode makes it easy, and accurate, folks. I love the fact that Alamode gives me the tools I need to be an efficient and effective appraiser. If you're with any other software company with your report writing, I highly recommend you check out Alamode. You can find them at alamode.com or pick up the phone and call them at 800-ALAMODE. Working RE is how I learn more about what's going on. Folks, about twice, maybe 3 times a week, I get an email from Working RE. Now, some of them are advertisements. Let's just be honest. And frankly, some of them I'm very interested in. These are advertisements that are directed toward me. These are things I'm interested in. These are things that I want to pause and say, do I want to learn more about this? Other times they are articles. And I'll be honest, sometimes I'm interested, sometimes I'm not. Sometimes I look at the heading and go, I got better things to do. But most of the time, Working RE brings to my doorstep, if you will. If we're talking doorstep equals inbox, it brings to my doorstep information that I am interested in. You should be as well. And it's free. Check them out. Go to workingre.com. Again, it's workingre.com. Finally, we're sponsored by DataMaster. DataMasterUSA.com is where you go to find out how to save yourself 30 to 60 minutes per report. Saves us about 38 to 40 minutes per report. Yes, I have that down, Jim, to the nearest minute, because I can time it. I can turn on the stopwatch and realize how much it takes out of my day or out of one of my employees' day to enter the data that DataMaster will enter for me, and they do it accurately. No more human error. Check them out. Go to DataMasterUSA.com. It's DataMasterUSA.com. All right, folks, welcome back to the program. We're speaking with my good friend, Tim Andersen, the Appraiser's Advocate. Tim, where can they find your podcast? You got a great podcast out there.
Dustin, thank you. You can go to my website. It's theappraisersadvocate.com/podcasts. I'm on Apple Podcasts. I'm on Blueberry. I'm not on Libsyn yet. I'm working on that. But yeah, it's out there. Just go to type in go to Google and type in the Appraiser's Advocate podcast. It'll take you right there.
It is fabulous. If you have been interested today in what Tim has to share in his wisdom, he is wonderful on his podcast. They're short. Usually about 10 minutes or less, so they can easily be synthesized, and just a wonderful, wonderful podcast. And Tim, you do a little coaching and mentoring with appraisers as well. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it doesn't, because I'm not in the retail end of the appraisal business anymore. And given my background as an instructor in my education, et cetera, I thoroughly enjoy working with my fellow appraisers and in keeping them out of the clutches of their state appraisal board. And I've had a lot of experience with that over many years. And in many cases, the issue is not so much what the appraiser has done or the appraiser didn't do, but it's how the appraiser responded to the state. And I have a podcast out there, and it's called Things You Don't Say. And there are certain things you don't say to the good folks of the state, like you don't say, "Oh, I didn't mean to do anything wrong," which basically means you did. So go ahead and check that out. But that's what I do now. You help appraisers in their businesses. I help appraisers in their practices. Yeah. And I help them to understand things like on page 1 of the appraisal, you don't say the market's in balance. And on page 6 in the narrative, you say, "Oh, by the way, there weren't any sales in the neighborhood last year," which is a fairly common inconsistency.
I'm not going to admit that I've done that before.
Appraisers just toss that in as boilerplate. They don't really think about it, but state investigators jump all over stuff like that. And that is something that's very easily avoidable. And I help appraisers come to realize stuff like that and avoid them, so that, again, they stay out of the clutches of their state appraisal boards.
Excellent. Okay. Well, the reason that Tim and I get together is because we're friends. We enjoy each other's company, but we also like to answer questions that have come in from listeners. And I've got a second question that came in. I'm just going to read this one to you. This comes from an individual who says that my next door neighbor was selling her house, and they know each other. They're friendly with one another. And basically the question is, can I accept this appraisal, or am I biased? What do you think, Tim?
Well, Dustin, we've sort of addressed this before a couple of years ago in another podcast. What the appraiser is really saying is, can I be independent, impartial, objective? Can I be a disinterested third-party observer? Can I leave my friendship aside and just appraise the property? And if you can, yeah, appraise the property. If you can't, then no, don't appraise the property. This really comes down to pure ethics. USPAP doesn't say anything about it. However, it does say, hello, independent, impartial, and objective, hello. And so if you honestly feel that you can appraise the house next door, for your neighbor, appraise it. I would recommend that you disclose that the client is the neighbor and it is the house next door. But other than disclosing that, you don't have to say, oh, we go out to dinner and we go to church together and our kids are on the same baseball. No, we don't have to do that. Just disclose, this is my neighbor and I know him or her, yet still feel I can provide an independent, impartial, and objective appraisal on the property. That's all you need to do. So no, that's perfectly fine.
Who gets to decide that, Tim? And what I'm getting at here is, I might say to myself, well, yeah, no, I can be impartial, I can be unbiased, but yet someone else might say, nah, I don't think so. My point is an appraiser might say, I can do an unbiased appraisal for this individual, yet someone else, and that's kind of what I'm getting at. Who is that someone else? Might say, I don't think so, Dustin.
Okay, well, that's one of the areas, Dustin, where we try not to talk about because it's an obvious flaw. Who makes that decision? Well, Dustin, you do. Now, is there somebody staring over your shoulder to see if you made the right one? Yeah, it's called your state appraisal board. But the state appraisal board is going to have to go in and show that had that person not been your ex-wife, you would have appraised it differently, which is extremely difficult to do.
Right.
So as a result, I've read hundreds of state appraisal board decisions over the years. I've read scores of court decisions for and against appraisers over the years. And I think I've read about bias twice. Wow. So this is not a big deal in the context you're mentioning it.
Right.
So this is not something that I would lose particularly any sleep over. There are so many other things to worry about. This is really not one of them. Is it an arm's length transaction? Well, you and I have been through this. I have a completely different definition of arm's length than do most appraisers. Okay, we're entitled to our opinions. But yeah, I think you can be arm's length. I think you can be independent, impartial, and objective and still appraise property for friends, family, so long as you disclose it properly. Now, that's the issue. Can you? Then there's the issue. Should you? Yeah. That's totally different. But can you? Yes, you can.
Yeah, and I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but I've heard appraisers say, well, I don't think you could ever unbiasedly do an appraisal for anyone that you know. And just to speak bluntly, Tim, if I didn't do appraisals for people that I know, I mean, let's face it, I live in Idaho. There's like 3 people that live here. I know everybody.
And two of them commute to California, right? Yeah.
So my point is I do appraisals. I wouldn't say all the time, but it happens once or twice. I do appraisals that, for individuals that I guess you could say that I know. So your advice is, first of all, step back, assess the situation, look at both whether you could be unbiased, whether someone else would believe that, and then disclose, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And Dustin, let's face it, you say, I've got to be absolutely unbiased. Well, we're human and therefore we're biased.
Right.
And what we try to do is we try to compensate. We can't leave it at the door, but we try to compensate for it. And the compensation is you disclose to the client that you're a friend, you're a neighbor, your kids grew up together, whatever it is you're going to disclose. Right. And then again, you step back and say, okay, now knowing that, can I be independent, impartial, objective, etc.? And if you think you can, then go ahead and do it, knowing that your state appraisal board is standing there over your shoulder looking at you. But again, this is not an area in which I've seen state appraisal boards or courts, for that matter, take a great deal of interest. Now, we're not going to go into bias, but I'm talking about this bias in this context. I'm not talking about other biases.
Sure. As always, my friend, thank you. Your wisdom is great, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate your time on this program. Give us your website one more time for individuals who would like to get to know you better and have need for your services.
theappraisersadvocate.com, and my email address is tim@theappraisersadvocate.com.
Tim Andersen, thank you, my friend.
You've been listening to the Appraiser Coach podcast with Dustin Harris. If you like what you hear, please give us a 5-star rating and post a short review on iTunes. For more in-depth insider information on how you can make more money as a real estate appraiser, visit theappraisercoach.com and sign up for the All-Star team today. Thanks for joining us. And now, get out there and create some value.
The web that many appraisals tend to be, okay. But if you don't need one, or you don't want one, or that's not your practice, then don't do it. There's no requirement you do.
I got to stop my dog from barking. Can you hear my dog barking?
No.
Oh my hell. Driving me crazy. Hold on 2 seconds. Bobber! Wait, come on, come here. Stay, sit. Sorry, I think if he's in here, he won't make noise.
You can always put that as an Easter egg at the end of the recording.
Oh, it'll be there. I'm sure it will. He looks out the window and he barks at squirrels, and we've got deer in our yard, and he just goes crazy. Just drives me nuts all day long. Anyway, maybe you didn't even hear it. Maybe I shouldn't have stopped things, but oh, now he wants to get out. Hold on, let me. We'll see what happens. All right. Rewind. Okay.